Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of X Factor. I'm your host, Rob Huxtable. And as always, we will unpack a topic of value creation for our members who are all leading private equity-backed companies on the journey from being owned by sponsors all the way through to an exit and a great liquidity event that'll generate great returns for all involved. I am your host, Rob Huxtable. I'm a partner with Falcon, and we execute CEO and other C-level retained searches for private equity-owned businesses. I'm also a co-founder of Private Equity CXO. And CXO, as most of you know, is the world's largest community of private equity-backed executives. And the mission of the organization is to help ensure a healthy asset class for decades to come by investing in the strength of the operators who are the ones on the ground at the portfolio company level, making everything happen. Delighted to get into an exciting and trendy topic today with our host, Kurt Stein, who is the president and COO of DCT Strategy, an IT transformation consultancy with a specialized practice in artificial intelligence. And Kurt, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Rob.
Yeah, great. So AI is on everybody's mind. It's being discussed from the boardroom to the kitchen table. But just tell us, Kurt, from your point of view, what is the short version of the actual history of AI, and why is it all of a sudden now on everybody's mind?
Certainly. It's always great to unpack that and clear up the mysteries. So AI has been around for a very long time. Companies have been using it. MasterCard's been using it. IBM. It's a technology that has been around for a very long time. Companies have been using it specifically within their businesses, but consumers never really were aware of it. You heard of it. You might have seen some movies. You may have heard it mentioned in some movies. But now when it comes down to the actual technology, you wonder why it burst onto the scene as well as it did. So OpenAI, which is the company that owns ChatGPT is the AI model itself. OpenAI was first founded by Elon Musk and several other folks a couple of years ago, 2018, 2019, and they wanted to develop an AI generative model. It's a large language model. And just to simplify what ChatGPT is, and then we'll get into how it burst onto the scene. OpenAI is a company, is technology that scrapes the web. It gathers information off the web, just as if we were looking at the web, searching up some article or some information. OpenAI scrapes it all into their data lake. And then ChatGPT is the actual AI model that now takes that information and gives an output of a response to people. So when you type in there, please tell me about the weather over the last 30 years, that data lake that they've scraped from the internet is now presented to you in milliseconds. Now, 2019, they start developing it. 2022 and around November, they released ChatGPT 3. There was a 1, there was a 2, then it came to a 3. They were innovating, they were changing, they were making it better over time. They released it to the public, and within 2 months, they hit 100 million users. That is a record. I believe TikTok was 9 months. Instagram, I think it just might have been a couple of years. So you could see how quickly it was adopted. And it was adopted because it's a very simple user interface. You just type some information in there and it gives you a great response back. That, because of how easy it was to use and how it was presented to the consumers, right, to all of us in such an easy fashion, we were able to get such a great look at what AI can do for us. And that has been the catalyst, or that explosion of AI onto the scene for all of us to be aware of. That was the catalyst. And that's why it seems like it came out of nowhere, but it's been around for a while.
Yeah, so we could say that ChatGPT's arrival is a sort of an alarm clock that's gone off, that's gotten everybody's attention to say, this is a movement that's been underway for some time. It's now hit mainstream, and it's an opportunity for those that haven't participated to date to get in the game and start thinking about their own AI strategy. And I think, as an aside, we're going to try to make a special accommodation on today's interview for those businesses that are in sort of more mature industries where it may be less intuitive that AI would be involved. Certainly everybody can understand how a software or other kind of tech company might adopt it, but we'll spend a little time with Kurt here talking about manufacturing, business services, franchising, and these other sort of more mature, less tech-centric industries. So Kurt, first question out of the gate, what comes to mind when you want to help a company understand the basics of how should they go about thinking about an AI strategy at a high level for their company?
Yep. The first and foremost, every business is representing their customers, right? So every business is thinking every day, every CEO is thinking every day about the customer experience. Why? Because without the customer experience being positive, you won't have any customers. So in my mind, it's always focus on the customer first. What is their experience? And if their experience is fantastic, you know you're going to maintain a customer and they'll be loyal to you and they won't go elsewhere. So if I'm thinking about an AI strategy, no matter what company it is, my first is to think about what do I want my customer experience to be? You have your strategy and how you're running your company today. You're putting pieces in place to make sure that your customer is being serviced correctly, being responded to, being listened to, getting feedback from them and making some changes or adaptations to how you go to market so you can still maintain that customer experience. But from an AI perspective, what you want to think is, what can I do to better improve my customer's experience? That would be the beginning. And from there, you can actually get around a table and start thinking about, what does that mean? How do I do it? And then start basically listing out ideas of what can be done. That would be the first thing you do from a strategy perspective. You don't have to worry about the AI use case and Python and all this technology. First think, what is the experience and what do I want it to be? Especially maybe you've seen some things that are happening out there in the markets with other competitors in your space, or you as a consumer. What do you like when you're working with a customer or I'm sorry, with a business? What is your experience? Is it response time? Is it they're constantly improving their products? Is it they're providing new products that you like? Things like that. You might want to chat down or jot down a couple of those areas, and that's where you would first begin.
And so, Kurt, you like playing offense out of the gate with AI as opposed to looking at the cost savings or sort of positively impacting SG&A, by perhaps automating tasks that were previously executed by a human?
Though that's the low-hanging fruit. So most companies will look at it first. If they're not aware of what they can do from a customer experience standpoint, most likely you'll think about, how do I cut costs? But then you get into that area of people believe that if you introduce AI, cutting costs means cutting people, right? So it starts getting into an area where you have to kind of break down, what does that mean? And do I really want to cut costs? Am I trying to automate processes? Do I want to improve the customer experience? I always think that you start with the customer experience first, then you move backwards, and you may find that if you cut costs, maybe in your supply chain, or maybe with the amount that you're paying for your product because you've gotten some information from AI, then you could provide a better customer experience because you can reduce your price points, or maybe you can get your product to market quicker, or maybe you just improve how your customer sees your product. So you're right, you can approach it from a defense perspective of cost cuts, automation, process improvements, things like that. But I just think that if you sit down and think about customer experience first, those other items should come to mind pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. And Kurt, for our listeners today, many of them are in the C-suite of lower middle market companies that are sophisticated enough to have attracted private equity investment, but maybe not of enough scale yet to have a full credit CIO on the non-tech industry side. So when you're dealing with some of these smaller businesses and more mature industries, who ends up being the champion and owning AI initiatives in cases where there's not a CIO present?
It's going to be a CEO, and it's going to be the leadership team, most likely sitting around a table in what we just discussed. They're reading the papers. They see what's happening out there. they're hearing about AI. They may or may not be aware of what it means specific to their business, but at least they're looking at their competitors, and they might be seeing what their competitors are doing. Maybe in the industry, in the trade talks, they're hearing this competitor is going to be moving into the AI space. So from that perspective, the leadership team is probably talking about, I hear about this AI, I read this in a paper, I've seen this company say this, I hear Amazon doing that. What does that mean to us? Can we apply any of that to our business? And I believe the first step would be having that conversation and then reaching out to either other folks in other industries that they may be peers with or friends with, and ask them, what are they doing? What are they hearing? Getting that feedback, similar to somebody saying, hey, I want to interview somebody. Can you tell me a little bit about them? Do you know them? Right. And you get that social feel for who they are from somebody you trust and respect. That might be one way. The second way would be to reach out to somebody like us and say, can you demystify this for us? How would that apply in an industry like ours? Mm-hmm. I think take advantage of that. Have that leadership team bring in somebody like ourselves or somebody else that's in that field and say, talk to us. Tell us what we don't know.
Sounds like job one is for, regardless of industry, every company to come to terms with the idea that AI needs to be a strategic imperative. And even if you don't have a fully formed strategy, it needs to take up good real estate in the minds of the executive team and be a point of discussion going forward, for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because of what you said a little bit earlier, right? If you're playing defense and cutting your costs, what if your competitor has already deployed AI, which allowed them to cut their costs on delivery, maintenance, service, whatever it may be? Mm-hmm. The margins are higher and more profitable. Perhaps that allows them to provide more benefits out to their employees to attract, the better employees coming to their business versus others. So there's a lot of different things they have to think about. If their competitors are deploying it, they're going to take advantages that will, create that blue ocean for them and not put them in a position that is tenable in the future.
Yeah. So if we think about sort of more mature industries, business services, manufacturing, and those types of businesses, how would you characterize the current state of AI adoption, and where do you see it going from here?
They're adopting, the larger players are adopting AI now. So you take from a manufacturing perspective, there's a lot of different use cases. And what they're doing is it's the data analytics. It's getting information to make decisions, which is it's 100% of where you begin. So how would we begin from this perspective? So you have that strategy perspective, like what's the AI strategy? Do you want to be cost cutting? Do you want it to be productivity? Do you want it to be enhancements to your customer experience? What is the driving factor there? It would be kind of the first place to start. Now, from a client perspective, we refer to things as the data lake. That's the information that a company has, the data that they have on their services, maybe their equipment and the performance of their equipment, stats of their employees, customers and what they're requesting, delivery times, price points, different times of the years, maybe promos and what the responses have been. That's their data lake. All that data that they have, they're going to need to make sure that that is housed. They have it somewhere. And before they start anything, that data lake needs to be clean. It needs to be cohesive. It needs to be in at least easily to get to. It could be more than one place, but that's where AI begins. Any company that wants to make any movement in AI, they need to have that data itself, data within their company itself. And what AI does, the model I gave before, OpenAI scrapes the web. The web is the data lake. And then ChatGPT provides the output from the data lake, which is the World Wide Web. Any company needs their data lake, their information. And then when that's clean and that's organized, which companies like myself can help them do, you can build any AI use case you want. It takes that information and it could provide you an output. So let's give an example. In manufacturing, you hear about things where machines, when will I know that my machine will break down? And there's solutions for it today. There's IoT solutions where you put sensors on a machine. It could tell you performance and things of that nature. But AI can also take a lot more stats, how much it's printing off or how much it's running per day, what the outputs are. And then it could tie it back to product, what product is being sent out, what has been the performance of that product. Has it been better performance in certain times of the years? Is there certain teams working within that manufacturing facility that are having a better success rate? And they can take all that information and they can build an AI model that can provide them with executive stats, which will give them insights into what's happening in their business so they can make adjustments in their business to either cut costs, improve their pricing, adjust inventory, adjust processes, maybe shut down certain machines, maybe retrain or reskill employees. So there's a lot of different things that AI can do for you, from providing information that can allow them to make very strategic decisions. So that's manufacturing. And there's a lot more use cases. I can go on and on and on for use cases for manufacturing and any other industry, because it's so unique. Any CEO can come up with, this is important to my business. You could build an AI use case that will allow them to impact that. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to be cost cutting for your product itself, it could provide you a ton of information from product, marketplace, what the consumers are doing. It could provide them information and allow them to make changes on that as well. Perhaps they're overpaying on some of their supply. Perhaps they're running things at different times of the day, and they should maybe change that or adjust that. So I'm just giving some ideas as to some use cases when it comes to that.
Yeah, it sounds to me that there might be this notion, which is not true, that, easier for big companies to leverage. They've got the resources and they're going to widen the gap. Well, there's enough going on that this has been democratized, and that middle market companies have just as much access, if not more, because of their ability to be nimble and change with a more dynamic trajectory. And that, starting this journey is an important first step, but do so with boldness and the expectation that within a relatively short period of time, you'll begin transforming the way that your business operates. So that's exciting. When you think of any popularized sort of use cases of more mature industries, be it services, consulting, manufacturing, anything specifically come to mind, Kurt, where AI is being used as a key investment by a larger business, and we can kind of unpack a little bit of a case?
Sure. From a consumer perspective, just to give somebody a feel for what it means before you start moving into industries, because in industries, like I said, it's very unique. I can give one example in one industry, and one of the, some of the guests here would think, well, that doesn't apply to me. And unless they start thinking about that and start applying it to their industry, it might be a little bit more difficult. Take Amazon, for instance. Andy Jassy just put a post out on LinkedIn maybe a couple of weeks ago. And he said that they've deployed AI now, large language models, into every aspect of their business now. Yes, it's a massive company, but they are making massive investments, and it's all about the customer experience. That's all Amazon cares about. It is the customer experience first and foremost. So they've deployed AI that can actually look at the boxes themselves before they leave the facility to make sure there is no damage on the box at all. Now, what's the importance to that? It's all about the customer experience. If you receive an Amazon box to your house and it's crushed because they didn't catch it in their facility, and it wasn't the fault of the carrier bringing it to them or Amazon itself bringing it to them, you as an end customer are going to think, oh man, that was, why is the box crushed like that? Is it broken inside? Is it destroyed? Is it ruined? That's what we think immediately. So they are removing that aspect from the customer experience because they want you to have a smile every time you receive that box. That is one use case that a large company like Amazon is doing. And that's not so revolutionary. It's very, very laser focused. And you think it's kind of simple the way they're applying it. Another use case would be around productivity. So if you take like counting, for instance, I was speaking with a partner of a firm, several weeks ago. his fear was, oh, it's going to replace people. Well, it's not today. It's not going to replace people. AI and humans working together is probably the best scenario. So it could take vast amount of information, numbers, spreadsheets, etc., and it could bring it into a tool and provide an output that would then allow the CPAs and the accountants to move quicker through either audits or tax returns or whatever the case may be, which would increase their productivity, right? Drive revenue higher because they can get through more. Now, certainly it's going to, with the resources they have, they're going to be working a lot. They're going to be getting through a lot more, but that's a great use case for customer experience. You as an end consumer or a business, if your audit was done quicker, if your tax returns were done quicker, that is going to be an A+ customer experience. You can be like, that is fantastic. They're moving through quickly. So that's one point. Second, they're cutting their costs, the amount of time it takes for people to go through things. Number three, it's probably cutting down on mistakes because the AI model itself is eliminating that because it's pulling information in and it's got algorithms in there that can actually reduce things. But then you have that last set of human interaction where the CPA or the accountant can look at it and make sure that everything in there is correct. They're that last barrier to make sure when it goes out to the customer, it's correct. So that's another use case. Chatbots. You hear a lot about chatbots. And you know, while it works and it's good from a volume perspective, I can understand why some businesses may not be so happy with it because it does kind of remove that business to customer experience. So me as a consumer, whenever I get to a chatbot, my thought, even being in the business, is thinking, oh man, this is going to be a long process, right? I don't know if it's going to be right with the answers they get back to me. How can I get to a person on the other end is what I'm thinking today. Now they are improving on the AI chatbots. They are using that generative AI, which is like ChatGPT, to get information. So an example would be if you or myself were to buy a vacuum, let's say, and we wanted to understand what the instruction manual was or what to do in a certain situation, that chatbot may be amazing. Type in there, I have this problem with my vacuum cleaner. What am I supposed to do? Well, that might be fantastic. It's just going to grab the information from either the internal systems and spit a response back to you in seconds. That is a great example of a chatbot where anybody here on this call should take advantage of that because that's going to be an instant response to your consumer and they should be happy with that customer experience. But if it becomes more of a complex problem where they can't get the information they want or they're not getting the answers they want, you're going to have a frustrated customer on the other end. So from that perspective, you need some type of a human interaction to make sure that customer experience doesn't turn poor. But I mean, there's a lot of companies that are using AI chatbots themselves.
Yeah, I mean, this is reminding me of the old BASF commercials when we were kids where they don't make the carpet, they make it softer. They don't make the car, they make it safer. And yes, some companies may employ chatbots, perhaps to their detriment. But the companies that are doing this right are saying, what are our strategic differentiators? What's at the heart of our strategy? And how can AI enable better, faster, stronger execution of those initiatives to the point where external stakeholders such as customers or suppliers may not even be aware at all that there's an AI strategy underway, but it is in fact helping that company transform more quickly.
Absolutely. 100%. It's exactly how it is. Like I saw somebody else posted on LinkedIn a little while ago. It was talking about the VC firms and companies putting together the packages to present their company to VC firms. And they did a ChatGPT output, a human output, and then what the result was. And it was like 74% of, I guess, VC firms chose the ChatGPT output for that presentation versus humans, which was much lower. Mm-hmm. And then I posed something on it saying, I would love to see ChatGPT and humans coming together when it came to that presentation. That might actually increase it from 74%, probably in the 90s, because we as people want to add the personal, right? You know, we're not so logic and just very monotonous in how we'll answer something. But if you add the emotions into it, et cetera, it would probably make that presentation much higher than just ChatGPT itself. So it ties back to that human AI experience being together. I think will provide companies that much better of a customer experience.
Yeah, it sounds great. So my takeaway so far is that number one, companies of all sizes and in all industries need to bring the concept of an AI strategy to the forefront and make it an imperative part of their business operations and strategic planning. Secondly, defining an AI strategy is a great way to get started, and that can either be amplifying the things that make you great and different, or reducing monotonous, tedious tasks, or making you more margin centric. And then when we think about kind of starting down that path, what are the 2 or 3 mistakes or hurdles you've seen companies make that has either derailed or caused issues, or maybe even compelled them to sort of walk away from the initiative altogether?
It begins with the data lake, as I said a little bit earlier. That data lake is your IP. That is where everything is fed from.
Mhm.
So just like drinking water comes from some reservoir and comes to cities and places, that is the same scenario when it comes to AI. So your data, it's from being on servers to being in storage devices or being in the web and your website, wherever it may be, you have to get a grip around where it is, how it's being managed, and then you have to structure that information. And you have to structure it. You have to tag the information properly. So I'll give you an analogy. If I took an Excel spreadsheet and I threw a bunch of information onto that spreadsheet and handed it to you, you would say, I don't know what this means. I mean, I could have told you the formula to Coca-Cola. It wouldn't matter because it didn't have headers, it didn't have columns, and it had no identifiers on there at all. That's what happens in typical servers, et cetera. You have information somewhere, housed somewhere. It's very specific and unique to some instance or to some application, but it doesn't mean anything, in the grand scheme of things. So you have to begin there with taking that, think of an Excel spreadsheet of putting, columns in there, labeling them, putting rows in there, labeling them, or tagging it, saying this is what this information means. And that's where every company begins. You begin with tagging and labeling your data within your data lake. And from there, you can build any AI tool you want. The second part is what comes up a lot, is where people get very concerned about bias in the data, misinformation in the data, and things like data poisoning. So if you think about that data lake itself, right? If you didn't have a fence around it, I mean, people could throw things into the lake, right? Because some type of misuse can happen within that lake itself. If you think about from an analogy perspective, even though I know we don't put, a lot of fences around reservoirs and things of that nature. But if your data lake, you have to look at the information. So somebody has to go through that information and make sure there isn't bias there. So what would bias mean? I mean, bias could be anything from a data perspective. It could be something that's kind of not stated correctly, maybe in customer notes, maybe in your call center, maybe somebody wrote something within the notes that they shouldn't have written in there. And it could be biased information, and your AI model would pull that information and provide a response to somebody that would have a negative customer experience, right? Or from a ChatGPT perspective, they have concerns around bias because they're scraping the web. Now, they're not scraping the greatest websites out there with the best information. They're scraping everything. So if somebody had a contrary opinion to some specific information, it's going to pull that information in, and that information could be biased. Or what's happening now is people are putting up false information, either writing false information into Wikipedia, or they're putting up a false website with biased information or misinformation. Well, a large language model like ChatGPT, that's going to scrape that information. It's going to provide you an output, including that type of information. So you can go into ChatGPT and you can write something in there and you can get a response that, may not be what you want. So from that perspective, you have the data lake, making sure it's tagged, it's labeled. And then you have to look at bias you have to have right policies and the right governance around AI itself. So
Mhm.
as a leadership team, you have to build that model along with your legal team and your HR team around what information will be accessible to AI, what can it be pulled from. There might be some information like credit cards and PCI information that you don't want available to that AI use model because that's not appropriate. Or some HR information around employees and sick days and things of that nature. You may not want that part of your AI model. So the leadership team has to come around a governance model and a policy model along with legal to say, what is information that should not be shared? What's information that could be biased, et cetera. And then you have to build your tools around it, your security tools around it to make sure that that data lake is not accessed from an AI perspective, or somebody's not going into that information and making changes without the leadership team's knowledge, right? So if you think about a software in any business, if there's ever a software release, there's governance procedures to when that software can be released, because they don't want to take down the worldwide network, or they want to impact the customer's experience. So they'll have change windows. They'll say, from Sunday between 12 a.m. and 4 a.m., that's a change window that will make any software changes and things like that in our business. You'll have to do the same thing around AI and say, who do I want touching that information? Who do I want in charge of that information? What am I where the bias is? Where's the information I want to kind of close off and make sure it's not used? And once you understand that as a leadership team, you won't get yourself in trouble from that perspective. But then you do have to continually keep looking at it, looking at the AI model, making sure the information that's being produced is not biased. There's no misinformation. So you need that constant management and maintenance oversight on an ongoing basis. And that will not only just make sure that it's operating efficiently, but then you're going to have improvements. You'll add new things to that tool, or maybe you'll add new AI models in the future that will allow you to take advantage of things you're now seeing after you deploy that model. So those are the things that I would see that most teams should be thinking about.
So one way to think about it is, whether you're cultivating one or not, you have a data lake. The question is it a pristine ecosystem, or is it polluted or overgrown with algae? And all these things combine together to form a flywheel. The strategy, the initiatives, the tactics you want to use, feeding off of a properly managed data lake can be a great place for businesses to start. I guess last question, when you say some of these interfaces and ChatGPT seems to be a theme, is a typical company going to end up creating their own bespoke AI situation, or is it going to be a collection of tools, or is it going to be a third-party system?
That's a good question. So from a large language model, which is what ChatGPT is, it's expensive to build something like that. And that's why you'll see Bloomberg is releasing Bloomberg GPT, right? They're going to take advantage of something like a GPT, because then you don't have to make that expense and build something like that out. But you can build your own AI models that are specific to your business. So maybe it's in email intents. Maybe you want to see from customer emails coming in or your Salesforce emails going out, what are the intents of your customers? What are they asking about? What are they looking for? What do they respond most to? You could build an AI model around that, from a simple standpoint, and you can take any use case you want from that. What information you want gleaned from that? Do you want to get a 3x improvement in terms of customers coming back? Do you want to push out products and services now to your customers because you understand the personalization of what they've bought before? They've purchased this and that. I'm going to push a personalized experience out there to them. So let's take an example. Somebody buys a motorcycle. Well, they have to have a helmet. Well, what if you push out some other personalizations to them? Maybe there's a radio that goes on the motorcycle, or certain, bags that go on the side, or newer helmets that come out. You could push personalizations out to your end customers, suggesting and make it a cross-selling or an upselling opportunity just by having that AI model in place. So if you're looking at something from a large standpoint, you could take with APIs, you could take GPT and add it into your business and do a lot with it. Or you could build some other models yourself that won't be as cost prohibitive as something like a GPT would be.
Yep. Okay, Kurt, great stuff. Sounds like the takeaways are demystify it, and it's not quite as complex as you might think. This is not about displacing human interaction with customers, but about making your business run smarter, more efficiently by learning more from what's happening already. It's about that data lake and making sure that the integrity of your systems are properly tagged and labeled. And then all kinds of things become possible. So for a lot of the listeners out there, I suppose there's some picking and shoveling work to get done in the near term to prepare themselves to properly execute a full AI strategy, but no time to start like the present.
That's correct.
Okay. So Kurt, how can folks find you if they want to learn more about leveraging your firm?
Sure. You can find me on LinkedIn. It's Kurt R. Stein. I put a lot of information out there as well. They can always look through that. I'll be putting podcasts up there as well. Or you can find us at DCT Strategy. So it's www.dctstrategy.com. Or they can reach out to me at Kurt, it's Kurt, at dctstrategy.com.
Sounds like you'd be a heck of a good river guide for those ready to take the journey. So everybody, thanks again for Kurt for joining us on X Factor today, and we'll see you all next time around. Thank you.